This is the second part of our video series about the gods of Pam'Ent. The first part we covered the old gods or serpentine gods of Pam'Ent, and in this part we will be covering the modern Casturknocken gods of Pam'Ent. And then in the third part we will talk about the non-Casturknocken gods, or entities that are very powerful that are treated like gods but aren't actually gods. Casturknock. The members of the Casturknock, as if you'll remember from the last episode, one of the favorite creations of Io, the god of life, have the ability to turn anything that they worship or treat with reverence into a god once they give it enough worship. And all of their descendants share this ability. The Casturknock slowly formed one of the most powerful empires in the history of Pam'Ent, being able to quickly surpass all other intelligent races because when they quickly discovered they had the ability to worship each other and turn into gods. And that compels a civilization beyond what most others were able to do, including even the very powerful and still existing Chromash Empire created by the Chromatic Dragons that at the time was being led by Tiamat herself, before she got banished to the Nine Hells. Many political figures of the empire were turned into gods. Most of these gods died with their worshippers during the Battle of Bigport, when Tiamat tried to reclaim the empire and defeat it in the name of the Chromash Empire, and succeeded. One of the only surviving gods after the Battle of the Opening, the only one, is Helm. Helm was taken with all of the survivors of the Battle of the Opening into the many tunnels beneath the three islands that were used for mining the rock that built the many Casturknocken cities, mainly the capital of Nakban. These worshippers of Helm down in the tunnels worshipped Helm, seeing him as a way to get revenge and as a way to protect themselves from the extraplanar forces that had just very recently destroyed their entire civilization. And that's why they held on to him more than they held on to any of the other political figures turned gods, because he had such a strong military reputation and such a strong anti-extraplanar policy that it made him one of the few people, the only person in the truly long run, that they held on to and that got brought back out of the tunnels with them when they finally left the tunnels, no longer being the Casturknocken people, but having spent enough time in there to evolve to be smaller, some of them stronger, shorter, and these are now the races known as halflings, gnomes, and dwarves. The Church of Helm cultivated many branches of paladins as soon as they were in the upper planes, because now that they were in the real world, they could do whatever they wanted. And they created many of these paladins so that they could go out and protect the world, now that they were on the surface of Pam'Ent. These included the branches of the Watchers over the Fallen, the Champions of the One True Vision, and the Vigilant Eyes of the God. These groups have one unifying mission: to protect the world from any extraplanar threats. Through the years, many of these paladins have become legendary adventurers because they're always traveling and trying to protect the planes. The Overcomer, known as Gargon, was a member of the Champions of the One True Vision. And Gargon was one of the very few survivors of the Battle of Bigport, and he personally helped Bob Builder kill the serpentine god Tiamat during the Battle of Bigport. Another very powerful and famous member of the Church of Helm is Nariel, a member of the Eight Winds of Winter, who helped to defend the city of Dundare. In the years directly after the Battle of the Opening, Chancellor, one of the few politicians who was not made a god outright via worship, because he just didn't have that kind of following, he was a lich, and Chancellor Vecna, the lich, actually worked together with Tiamat to organize the Battle of the Opening, where the portals opened on either side of the capital city, Nakban, destroyed the continents, separating the three islands from one continent into three islands, and separating the surrounding continent into two large continents known as Draken's Land, and the other one that no one knows about that might be Titan's Land. Vecna then got to work being left alive by Tiamat after the Battle of the Opening. Vecna used a series of rituals to become a god, but instead of being worshipped by living creatures, Vecna was worshipped by all of the souls of all dead Casturknock. And because Vecna had such a large pool of worshippers that just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, Vecna soon became the strongest of the Casturknocken gods. And he was working with Tiamat for a long time. And eventually, all other Casturknocken gods didn't like him because he's ridiculously strong. He's out here doing all of these world-conquering things with Tiamat and trying to bring her back out of the Nine Hells. Eventually, he gets betrayed by Cass, and Cass, along with Tiamat and a bunch of other Serpentine gods, banish him from existence. And the only way to bring him back is to connect his hand and his eye to his body, which is somewhere outside of any atmosphere. Humans of the North, children of Sophie, one of the few survivors of the Battle of the Opening who didn't flee underground, wander alone and safe in the far, far north, away from the prison of Lockport, where all of the captured Casturknock were being kept. For centuries, they were godless, unaware of their ability to create gods. These new generations of humans, descendants of the Casturknock, would create weak gods of countless number that were cool rocks that they worshipped, or trees that had weird branches, or wild animals that they saw twice in a row. And they worshipped all of these gods until one day the Sealy Court made a bridge that combined the Fey realm to the actual world. And seeing the Fey, they immediately started to worship the Fey because they were this weird extraplanar thing. And so they created these countless Fey gods, unknowable sort of connection, unknowable ideas. There's no way to know what they're going to do because they have this immense power that they didn't used to have, and they have no alignment, being just these chaotic, neutral beings of chaos and lies and trickery. And the organized religions of the South did not like that when they came to the North. But one did. Helm, who gets brought to the North with the camp of Jonathan Dabak, the first person to lead people up into the North, and eventual first king of Facade. But anyway, Helm gets brought up and falls in love with Murdain, one of the Fey gods. After the Casturknock had been taken prisoner by the devils, fled from the city of Demon Keep, now known as the Elves, they began to worship the sun and created the god Lathander. Lathander soon became the most powerful and most commonly worshipped of the pantheon of southern gods. When he, being taken up north with the followers of his and the other southern religions, with Jonathan Dabak's journey into the north, when he discovered the Fey pantheon, he saw them as a threat. He saw them as a chance for Vecna to be repeated. So Lathander decided to wipe out the Fey god pantheon. He did this by ordering his followers to do crusades into the north, where they murdered all of the followers of Fey gods. This went on for centuries, with wars between the north and the south being led by the Dabaks, who were at first tried to do peace and eventually even switched sides, shockingly enough, with going against the Red Sun Empire and fighting for their own and creating the Kingdom of Facade, still subjugating the people but giving them more freedoms than they would have had. But at some point during this war, with years of war, someone, no one knows whose side, reaches out to the Great Serpent for help to try to completely destroy their enemy. The great serpent responds by descending upon the earth and creating hundreds of Tarrasques that walk across the entirety of the three islands, destroying mage towers and cities and mountain ranges and killing 90% of all the population of Casturknocken descendants, being humans, elves, halflings, gnomes, dwarves. 90% of them get murdered by Tarrasques during this, at the peak of this war, during an event known as the Trampling. During the Trampling, Selena and Murdain, two of the Fae gods, come down to try to help their supporters. They flee with their supporters into a cave known as the Cave of the Founders, who this was one of the first places that the Bach camped out in when they were going up north for the first time. These survivors were jumped by a group of crusaders on the side of Lathander and Lathander himself, who attacked the now weakened gods as most of their survivors are being murdered in front of them. As these now weakened gods, as most of their worshippers are being murdered in front of them. They get super weakened, and Lathander comes over and converts them to be in his image and creates two new gods and kills these gods for being Fae gods and creates two new gods known as Enoch and Lectum. These original gods' personalities and everything immediately gets wiped, which pisses off the god Helm, because he was in love with Murdain, and now Murdain is dead, and now this random god called Enoch that's doing weird shit. Along with Lathander, the early elves worshipped the harvest as it came every year, creating the god Chantia. The god Chantia and Lathander were lovers. The worship of Chantia never spread as far as the worship of Lathander did. It is still mostly located in the south with the elves, by the elves of the High Hedge mostly. In the faith of Chantia, they put the bodies of the living into trees partially, and then the trees grow around them as they decompose. And this leaves the markings of faces in trees. And the entire mage of High Hedge, the hedge mage of High Hedge, is made up of these trees. And so as you're wandering through it, you'll sometimes see the face of a dead guy, which is a fun time. Lectum, when he was created by the god Lathander, was assigned a domain at random. He was given the domain of organized combat. This means that he mostly is worshipped by people who really love trial by combat or fighting pits or gladiators. Like, they're just people who want to fight the strongest enemy. And so he has some of the strongest followers, although he has no real organized religion. It's just sort of random people that follow him that fight shit. The most powerful of which being the Executioner. Enoch, when he was created by the god Lathander, was also assigned a domain at random. Enoch was given the domain of childbirth. Enoch is worshipped by midwives and nuns. Lathander, Chantia, Lectum, and Enoch are considered a part of the Lathandrian pantheon. So if you're a follower of Lathander, you also recognize these other gods as being worth worship, even if you don't always worship them yourself. Quadrupapa is the newest of the Casturknocken gods, being created by tradesfolk who always were traveling around and fixing up houses. Became a myth that this one specific potato was lucky. So many of them would pray to this potato, leave its offerings, and then travel somewhere safely. Slowly, this created the god Quattrapapa because they were worshiping this potato, and it became a god. One of the greatest spreaders of this religion, talking about it the most and getting the farthest, was Bob Builder, who eventually became the famous adventurer Saint Sir Bob Builder, who is famously the one who had the last blow and killed Tiamat, the Serpentine gods. With Tiamat, a Serpentine god. And yeah, that's the gods of... That's the Casturknocken gods. There's many others. Like, really, with how the Casturknocken gods being created by people, you really can just bring me any god if you want to play in a game with one, and I'll let it exist. but these are the ones that already exist. I have crazy lore for.